Lightning tore the sky as the carriage lurched through the sodden wilds of the English countryside. Inside, Lady Evelyn Ashcroft pressed her gloved hands to the rain-smeared window, heart pounding with a strange, expectant dread. Each thunderclap seemed to draw her closer to the forbidding silhouette of Blackwood Hall, its towers rising from tangled woods like the bones of some ancient beast. The storm was relentless, wind screaming, rain lashing, yet Evelyn's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from a restless hunger she scarcely dared to name. "Compose yourself, Evelyn," Lady Helena snapped, her voice as sharp as the carriage's jolt over muddy ruts. "This is not a pleasure visit. Remember our purpose." Her mother's eyes, cold and appraising, flicked to her. "We must present ourselves with dignity. The future of Ashcroft depends on it." Evelyn bit back a retort. She was used to her mother's iron composure, the ceaseless talk of duty and alliances, the ever-present shadow of their family's dwindling fortune. But as the carriage shuddered to a halt before the crumbling portico, Evelyn's gaze was drawn again to the vast melancholy facade. Blackwood Hall was a place out of a Gothic tale ivy strangling the stones, windows dark as secrets. A footman braved the gale to open the door. Inside the echoing hall, guests gathered in nervous clusters, voices hushed beneath the thunder's rumble. The air was thick with rumors of deaths, of scandal, of the Earl himself, Adrian Sinclair. Evelyn's heart skipped. She had heard the stories, the tragic accident, the vanished fiancé, the Earl's self-imposed exile. He had not been seen in society for years. The gathering was a strange, rain-soaked masquerade. Candlelight flickered on anxious faces. Evelyn's gown clung to her ankles, damp from the journey. Lady Helena steered her toward the assembled guests, all quick to appraise, to judge. The Ashcrofts' presence here was no accident. Her mother's schemes were as relentless as the rain. "Lady Ashcroft," murmured a portly gentleman, bowing low. "And your lovely daughter. Such a night for introductions. Perhaps Blackwood Hall still holds its magic." Evelyn offered a polite smile, but her attention was drawn to the far end of the hall, where a solitary figure stood beneath a battered portrait. He was tall, shoulders rigid beneath a black coat, his face obscured by a half-mask of smooth onyx. Lightning illuminated the scar that ran from his jaw to his temple, cruel and pale against his skin. The room seemed to recoil from him, a tide of whispers rippling through the air. "That is the Earl," breathed a woman at Evelyn's elbow. "He rarely appears. They say he cannot bear to be seen, not since the accident. Some claim his fiancée's ghost haunts the West Wing." The woman shuddered, eyes gleaming with morbid delight. "Such tales," Lady Helena hissed, her grip tightening on Evelyn's arm. "Do not be drawn in. Remember, you are promised to Lord Pembroke. Our future is set." But Evelyn scarcely heard her. There was something in the Earl's bearing, a deep, wounded dignity, that drew her gaze. He stood apart, commanding yet solitary, the mask both shield and prison. As the guests murmured and watched, Evelyn felt a surge of empathy, a longing to understand the man behind the rumors. Their eyes met across the hall, just for an instant. Evelyn's breath caught. Behind the mask, his gaze was fierce, searching, then shuttered, as he turned away into the shadows. "Come, Evelyn," Lady Helena urged. "You must not stare. We cannot afford to offend." Evelyn allowed herself to be led into the press of guests, but her thoughts spun wildly. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest inside her chest. She was promised elsewhere, her path set by duty, yet the mystery of the masked Earl beckoned to her like a siren's call. As the night deepened, so did the whispers of deaths, of scandal, of love lost and lives shattered. Evelyn found herself haunted by the Earl's presence, by the sadness that clung to him like a second skin. She knew she should turn away, think only of her family, her duty. But her heart, rebellious and unyielding, would not let her. She could not have guessed then how her fate would become entwined with the man behind the mask, nor how the secrets of Blackwood Hall would soon demand a price from them both. The storm raged on, and Evelyn felt the first stirrings of a choice that would change everything. The days at Blackwood Hall settled over Evelyn like a heavy velvet curtain, stifling, ornate, and impossible to ignore. Each morning, She woke to the echo of rain against the high, cracked windows, the air thick with a chill that seemed to seep from the very stones. The household moved to the rhythm of rigid etiquette, breakfasts in silence, afternoons of prescribed visits and needlework, and always the unspoken awareness of the Earl's presence, ghost-like yet commanding. Evelyn quickly learned the choreography of the place. Servants scurried at her approach, eyes averted, murmuring tales when they thought her out of earshot. In the drawing room, the ladies of the neighboring gentry exchanged pleasantries, as brittle as spun glass, their words laced with curiosity and caution. But it was Adrian Sinclair, the reclusive earl, who occupied her thoughts. She watched him from across candlelit corridors and shadowed gardens, noting the stiff set of his shoulders, the way he avoided the sun. The mask he wore, a smooth sliver of dark leather, was both armor and warning. He spoke little, moving through his own halls like a spectre, the servants shrinking from his path. At dinner, Evelyn found herself seated across from him, the long table stretching between them like a moat. The silver gleamed, the crystal caught the firelight, but the atmosphere was charged, brittle with secrets. Lady Helena, ever vigilant, kept her conversation pointed and safe. Trying to bridge the chasm, Evelyn offered, "The gardens, my lord, are quite beautiful, even in this weather. I saw a thrush by the old fountain this morning." The earl's gaze flicked up, eyes storm-dark above his mask. "I would not have thought the gardens held any charms for our guests. Most find them melancholic, if not entirely wild." His tone was sharp, and Evelyn felt the sting of it, but she pressed on, voice gentle. "Sometimes wildness is a kind of freedom, my lord." He set down his glass with a click. "Or a sign of neglect." Lady Helena shot Evelyn a warning look, but the girl did not shrink. The other guests exchanged glances, pretending interest in their soup. Later that evening, as Evelyn wandered the halls, she stumbled upon a small tableau by the servants' quarters. A little girl, no more than 6, wept quietly on a worn bench, her dress torn at the hem. Evelyn knelt beside her, gathering her close. "There now," she soothed, tucking a stray curl behind the child's ear. "What's happened?" The child sniffed. "Cook says I'm a bother, miss. She says Mama'll lose her place if I break another plate." Evelyn smiled softly. "We all make mistakes. I shall speak to Cook, and we'll see about mending your dress. But you mustn't cry." She offered her handkerchief, embroidered with violets. "Here, for brave girls only." A shadow fell over them. Evelyn looked up to find Adrian standing in the doorway, unreadable behind his mask. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The Earl's voice was low. "Miss Ashcroft, you are uncommonly kind." Evelyn rose, brushing off her skirt. "It is nothing, my lord. She is only a child." Adrian's gaze lingered on the girl, then on Evelyn, as if seeing her properly for the first time. "Kindness is rarely nothing," he said quietly, and then he was gone, his footsteps vanishing into the gloom. Rumors thickened like fog in the days that followed. Evelyn heard snatches in the servants' whispers and the drawing-room's careful gossip. The tale of the Earl's accident had grown teeth. It was not a mere fall from a horse, but a duel. Some said it was over a woman, others over honor lost and debts unpaid. They spoke of blood on the lawn, of a scream at midnight, of the Earl's vanished betrothed. Lady Helena dismissed it all with a wave. "Foolishness. He will not listen to such nonsense. Remember why we are here." But Evelyn's curiosity only grew, her empathy for the scarred man deepening. She found herself seeking glimpses of him on the terrace at dawn, pacing the library at dusk. Sometimes she caught him watching her in return, his expression unreadable, haunted. The uneasy balance shattered with the arrival of Lord Henry Pembroke. He swept into Blackwood Hall in a flurry of expensive linen and overbearing confidence, his laughter echoing down the stone corridors. Evelyn's betrothed was every inch the ambitious suitor, well-spoken, handsomely dressed, and utterly convinced of his own importance. At their first meeting in the drawing-room, Lord Henry clasped Evelyn's hands with possessive warmth. "My dear, I had feared the weather would keep me from you, but nothing, not even these wretched roads, could deter me." Evelyn forced a smile. "You are very persistent, my lord." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Persistent and loyal. Qualities that sum." He glanced meaningfully toward the shadowed doorway. where the Earl lingered, seemed to lack. Dinner that evening was a battlefield beneath a veneer of civility. Lord Henry launched into tales of London society, of Parliament and privilege, but the undercurrent was clear. He sought to diminish the Earl at every turn. Some men, Henry declared, find it easier to hide from the world than to face it. Reputation, after all, is not rebuilt by solitude. Adrian's hand tightened on his wineglass, the scar beneath his mask whitening. Evelyn bristled, voice trembling with restrained passion. There is more to honor than society's approval, Lord Henry. Some wounds are not so easily healed, nor so easily understood by those who have never suffered. Lord Henry's smile was thin. You are ever the romantic, Miss Ashcroft, but I would not see you drawn into scandal. The Earl's history is not suitable company for you. Lady Helena's eyes flashed a warning, but Evelyn would not be cowed. I believe it is cruel to judge a man by rumors or to mock suffering you have never known. A tense silence fell. The fire popped in the grate. Adrian met Evelyn's gaze, something raw and unspoken flickering in his eyes. After dinner, Lady Helena cornered Evelyn in the corridor. You must not antagonize Lord Henry. Our position is too fragile. I will not have you risk everything for a passing fancy. It is not a fancy, Mamma. Evelyn replied, her voice trembling. I only wish to be just. Justice is not for us to dispense, her mother hissed. It is security we require. Do not forget yourself. That night, Adrian stood alone in his study, the storm outside echoing the turmoil within. He reached up and with shaking fingers removed his mask. The firelight revealed the jagged scar that marred his once handsome face, twisting his mouth, bisecting his brow. He stared at his reflection in the dark glass of the window, seeing not only the ruin of his features, but the deeper wounds beneath. He remembered the duel, the rage, the betrayal, the gun's flash in the mist. He remembered her scream, the way she ran into the night, the silence that followed. His heart was a wound that would not close. Yet it was Evelyn's kindness that haunted him now, the way she had comforted the servant's child, the courage in her eyes as she defended him. He watched her from the shadows of the hall, torn by longing and fear. She was light to his darkness, but he knew the cost of hope. He could not, would not, drag her into his ruin. In the hush of the night, as Evelyn lay awake, her heart battled between duty and desire. She sensed the shifting of fate, the stirrings of something dangerous and irresistible. Unseen, Adrian watched her window from the darkness, his mask abandoned, the scars of his flesh and heart bared to the empty night. Neither of them knew how soon their choices would collide with destiny, or how quickly the fragile walls around their hearts would begin to crumble. The days at Blackwood Hall unfolded with a curious new rhythm, each one tugging Evelyn deeper into the pulse of a life she had never imagined. The morning she found herself summoned to the Earl's study, the rain had finally ceased, leaving the ground slick and shimmering beneath a pale, uncertain sun. Adrian Sinclair stood by the window, his figure half-shadowed by the faded velvet drapes. He did not look at her as she entered, instead watching the distant village where smoke curled from humble chimneys. You wish to see me, my lord? Evelyn's voice was steady, though her heart was not. He nodded once, still gazing outward. Mrs. Pembury, our housekeeper, tells me you have a talent for organizing chaos. I am, his lips twisted wryly, not adept at such matters. Blackwood's charitable work has suffered these past years. I should like you to assist. Evelyn was startled. You trust me with this? A faint smile ghosted his mouth. The villagers will benefit. Your compassion is evident. Their eyes met, and something unspoken lingered before he turned away, abruptly formal. You may begin tomorrow. Mrs. Pembury will provide the necessary accounts. Thus Evelyn's days changed. She rode into the village in the Earl's battered carriage, visiting cottages with baskets of food and medicinal herbs. At first, Adrian accompanied her only out of duty, silent and withdrawn, his presence a shadow at her shoulder. But necessity forced them together. Long afternoons tallying supplies, conferring with the vicar, overseeing repairs to the orphanage roof. In those hours, awkward silences yielded slowly, stubbornly to conversation. Once, Evelyn glanced up from a ledger to find Adrian watching her. The hard lines of his face softened. "You are remarkably persistent, Miss Ashcroft," he remarked, a glint of reluctant amusement in his eyes. "Most would have fled after the first day in the village." She smiled, matching his dry tone. "I have been accused of stubbornness before, my lord." He almost laughed, and Evelyn caught a glimpse of the man he might have been, a man not yet hollowed by pain. One afternoon, as they returned from the village, they encountered a cluster of children gathered at the lane's edge, clutching makeshift bouquets. The smallest, a red-haired girl, held out a wild daisy to Adrian. "For you, sir. Mama says you paid for our new roof." Adrian hesitated, his hand trembling as he accepted the flower. "Thank you, Molly," he managed softly. Evelyn watched his composure falter, his eyes bright with something like gratitude and shame. Later, as they sat together in the study, Evelyn ventured gently. "The villagers seem devoted to you, my lord. It is not what society would have me believe." He was silent for a moment. "Society prefers its monsters simple," he said at last, "and its heroes unblemished." His bitterness was raw, but it slipped as he gazed at the daisy on his desk. "I have not always deserved their loyalty." "Perhaps you have," Evelyn murmured. "More than you think." He glanced at her then, unguarded. "You do not know me, Miss Ashcroft. No one truly does. You could allow someone to try." He flinched, withdrawing into himself. That would be unwise. Yet in the days that followed, the barrier between them thinned. Evelyn discovered his love for art sketches, hidden in a battered portfolio, landscapes and portraits alive with longing and loss. She found him one evening in the library, hunched over a canvas, his hands stained with charcoal. "They're beautiful," she breathed, awed. He tensed, but did not hide his work. "It is the only place I do not feel judged." She touched his arm, tentative. "We all have places we hide." He looked at her, truly looked, and in that moment Evelyn sensed the depth of his isolation. Later, she learned the truth of his scars, not only of flesh, but of guilt. His fiancée's death had not been the simple tragedy the world supposed. It was a carriage accident, but Adrian's own words haunted her. "I should have been there. I let her go alone. I was too proud, too angry." He never finished the story, but Evelyn heard the self-reproach in every syllable. Meanwhile, Lady Helena's pressure intensified, her warnings sharpened by fear. "You must accept Lord Henry's proposal, Evelyn. The Ashcroft name cannot weather further disgrace, nor can I bear the thought of poverty. Blackwood Hall is a ruin. The Earl is a ruin. Henry will keep you safe." Evelyn faltered, torn between duty and the fragile hope blooming in her heart. Lord Henry pressed his suit with increasing urgency, his flattery growing thin, his jealousy plain. "You waste your time here, Evelyn. You risk your reputation for a man who will never belong to you." But the villagers' stories contradicted everything she had been told. Old Mrs. Finney recalled how Adrian had paid her husband's debts. The vicar spoke of quiet gifts to the poor. Even the children trusted him, running to him with laughter. Evelyn's certainty wavered. The world was not as simple as her mother would have it. Adrian, for his part, saw the threat that hovered over Evelyn's future. He watched her with Henry, saw the way her smile faltered, the way her spirit dimmed beneath her mother's remonstrations. He told himself to keep his distance, to spare her the ruin of his name and reputation. Yet he found himself drawn to her as inexorably as the tide. On a night washed in silver moonlight, Evelyn escaped the suffocating parlor for the gardens. The air was cool, scented with roses and damp earth. She wandered among the tangled hedges, heart aching with indecision. A sudden movement in the shadows startled her. Adrian emerged, his coat thrown carelessly over his shoulders, eyes dark and searching. "Forgive me," he said, voice rough. "I did not mean to intrude." "You are not intruding," Evelyn replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. They stood in silence, the moonlight painting their faces in pale relief. At last Adrian spoke, each word weighted with honesty. "I have grown used to being alone. It is a safer way to live, I think. But sometimes—" He hesitated, then continued, "Sometimes the silence is too much to bear." Evelyn's breath caught. "I know that feeling. I have never belonged anywhere, neither in the world my mother wants for me, nor in the world I long for. Adrian looked at her, the mask he wore by day gone in the hush of night. I'm not the man you deserve, Evelyn. My past, my scars, would only bring you pain. She shook her head, tears bright in her eyes. We all carry scars, Adrian. Some are simply less visible. He reached for her hand, hesitant, as if fearing she might draw away. When she did not, he laced his fingers with hers, their connection fragile and electric. Do you truly believe, he asked softly, that two such lonely souls might find solace together? Evelyn did not answer with words. Instead, she stepped closer, her heart pounding with hope and fear. The world was silent, save for the sigh of wind in the roses. Neither noticed the window above where Lady Helena watched, nor the path where Lord Henry lingered in the shadows, fury building. But in that moment, beneath the moon's watchful gaze, Evelyn and Adrian's shared confession of loneliness drew them together, binding them in a way neither had anticipated. What neither of them could know was how swiftly fate would move, and how soon secrets and choices would threaten to tear them apart. The first thunderous crack of carriage wheels on Blackwood Hall's gravel drive announced a storm far more dangerous than any of wind or rain. From the drawing-room window, Evelyn watched a grand coach roll to a halt, liveried footmen springing to attention. The Dowager Countess of Blackwood had returned, a woman as formidable as the family crest, and twice as cold. Her presence, once felt, seemed to seep into the very stones of the hall, chilling the corridors and quickening the anxious glances of every servant. Evelyn saw Adrian waiting beneath the portico, his figure rigid with anticipation and dread. The dowager descended, regal in deep mourning black despite the golden afternoon. Her silver hair was sculpted with precision, her eyes sharp as frost. She did not embrace her son, but regarded him with a gaze that seemed to measure every flaw. So, she said, I find you much as I left you, Adrian. The house crumbling, the name in ruins, and you still skulking about in shadows. Adrian inclined his head, his mask firmly in place. Welcome home, mother. Home? The dowager's lip curled. This is no home, not as it stands. You may still save what is left if you are not too proud to act. Evelyn felt the words like a lash, though they were not meant for her. Adrian's jaw clenched, but he only gestured for the dowager to enter. Within the hour, the house was transformed. Servants scurried under the dowager's orders, dusting, polishing, rearranging. She moved through the halls like a force of nature, her voice slicing through the hush. This portrait is crooked. The silver has tarnished. Has no one any pride left? When the housekeeper trembled, Evelyn stepped in to help, her gentle tone soothing, but the dowager's eyes found her, appraising and dismissive. Miss Ashcroft, she said at luncheon, I trust you are enjoying your sojourn here. I should hope my son's hospitality has not emboldened you to forget your place. Evelyn flushed but answered calmly, His lordship has been most gracious. I am glad to be of service. The dowager's lips thinned. Service. You might do him greater service encouraging him towards sense. A man in his position ought to remarry. Blackwood cannot be saved by sentiment. Adrian's hand stilled on his fork. The tension at the table was thick as clotted cream. Mother, he began, but she cut him off. Do not pretend you do not see it. The tenants grumble, the creditors circle. You are all that is left of our name. It is time you stopped hiding behind masks and misfortune. Silence reigned. Evelyn caught Adrian's eye, saw the rawness there, the old wounds freshly scored. After luncheon, the dowager retreated to her chambers, trailed by a coterie of servants. Adrian lingered in the corridor, one hand pressed to his brow. Evelyn approached quietly. She is formidable. He managed a bitter smile. She has never forgiven me, nor herself, I think. For what? For surviving. For failing to save what she cherished. His voice was soft, hollow. She blames me for the family's fall. Perhaps she is right. Evelyn shook her head, her voice gentle but firm. She is wrong. I have seen what you have done for your people, for this house. You carry more than your share, Adrian. He looked at her then, truly seeing her, and for a moment the weight seemed to ease. Yet the dowager's arrival was only the beginning. Within days, whispers from the hall spilled into the countryside and from there to London. Letters arrived acidic and anxious. Lady Helena cornered Evelyn in the library, her face pinched with worry. "Do you know what is being said in town?" she hissed. "They say you are dallying with a ruined man, a scarred recluse. That your reputation is tainted by association. Lord Henry grows impatient. He will not be made a fool." Evelyn's hands trembled, but her chin lifted. "I have done nothing to be ashamed of, Mamma." Lady Helena's reply was a hiss. "Shame is not always in what is done, but in what is believed. You must accept Henry's proposal. I will not see you cast out. I will not see our family ruined by your stubbornness." The threat was real. Lord Henry's visits grew more frequent, his manner shifting from charm to command. One afternoon, he found Evelyn alone in the conservatory, his voice lowered, menacing. "You think yourself above scandal, Evelyn? The world is not so forgiving. If you refuse me, I will see to it that Sinclair's madness is known. They will call him unfit a danger. You will have ruined him and yourself for nothing." Evelyn recoiled, anger flaring. "You would destroy a man's life for pride?" Henry's eyes glittered. "For justice, for what is owed." "You are mine by right, Evelyn. Do not forget it." She fled, breathless, her heart pounding with fear and fury. It was then that the Dowager, sensing opportunity, announced her scheme. "A masked ball," she declared, "to restore Blackwood's standing and remind society that we are not yet finished. Adrian, you will preside. Miss Ashcroft, you may prove your usefulness in the preparations." The hall became a hive of activity. Evelyn threw herself into the work, determined to help Adrian reclaim some measure of dignity. She drafted invitations, designed decorations, negotiated with the village musicians, and oversaw the kitchen's feverish preparations. Adrian, at first reluctant, was drawn into her orbit. Together, they wandered the hall, discussing drapery and music, the best arrangement of lanterns, the placement of tables. In those moments, the burdens of their stations faded. They laughed over mislaid place cards, shared secret smiles when the Dowager disapproved of a color or a song. Adrian's wit, long hidden, surfaced dry, self-deprecating, sometimes even mischievous. "Do you truly believe," he asked one evening as they hung garlands in the ballroom, "that a dance can change the world?" Evelyn smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Perhaps not the world, but it can change a heart. Or two." He looked at her then, and the air between them shimmered with hope. One afternoon, while Evelyn inspected the ballroom's progress, she discovered Adrian in a rare moment of peace. He sat by the window, sketchbook balanced on his knee, the sunlight catching the silver threads in his hair. She watched from a distance unseen, as his hand moved with quick, sure strokes. Later that night, restless with anticipation, Evelyn wandered the hall's upper corridor. Through a half-open door, she glimpsed candlelight and heard the soft scratch of charcoal. Curiosity drew her forward. Adrian sat at his desk, wholly absorbed. The mask was set aside, his scarred face illuminated by flickering flame. In his lap, the sketchbook lay open. Evelyn's breath caught as she saw herself, her likeness rendered with heartbreaking tenderness, her eyes wide and searching, her lips parted as if caught mid-laugh. There was no judgment in his gaze, only admiration, longing, and a vulnerability that stole her breath. She stepped back, her heart thundering, but a floorboard creaked beneath her slipper. Adrian looked up, startled, his face flushed with mortification. "Miss Ashcroft, Evelyn, I did not realize—" She hesitated in the doorway, her voice trembling. "It is beautiful, Adrian. You have made me more than I am." He shook his head, closing the sketchbook as if to shield himself. "No, I only drew what I saw. You are—" He broke off, searching for words. "You are a light in this darkness. I wish I could give you more than a portrait." "I wish." She crossed the threshold, her hands twisting in her skirts. "You have given me more than you know. I have never felt seen until now." He rose, uncertain, torn between hope and disbelief. "You do not fear what others say, what your family demands." She smiled through tears. "I fear only a life lived without truth, without kindness, without you." For a moment, It seemed the whole world held its breath. Adrian reached for her, then faltered, the old wounds holding him back. But Evelyn bridged the distance, her hand gentle against his cheek. "You are not alone, Adrian. Not anymore." He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "Nor are you, Evelyn, so long as you wish it." Outside, the hall shimmered with anticipation, lanterns swaying in the night breeze. In the ballroom below, servants placed the final touches, unaware that something far more important than reputation or revenge was taking shape. The night before the ball, Blackwood Hall was poised on the edge of change. Evelyn stood at her window, the moon a silver coin in the velvet sky, her heart full of hope and fear. Below, the dowager plotted. Henry seethed, and the guests, London's sharpest tongues, began to arrive, drawn by the promise of scandal and spectacle. But Evelyn thought only of the man who had seen her truly, and the dance that might, if fate allowed, set them both free. What waited beneath the masks was a secret neither could yet imagine, and the night ahead promised revelations that would alter everything. Lanterns blazed from every arch and window of Blackwood Hall, their golden glow spilling onto the lawns where carriages lined up like glossy beetles in the dusk. Music drifted into the night, the strains of violin and harp promising enchantment. Inside, the ballroom glittered an ocean of silk, brocade, and masked faces. The air was charged with anticipation, and for the first time in years, the hall pulsed with life. Evelyn stood at the top of the stairs, heart thudding beneath a borrowed gown of pale blue satin. Mrs. Pembury had pressed it into her arms that afternoon, along with a string of pearls and a whispered blessing. "You look a vision, miss. Go and show them you belong." She did not feel she belonged. But as she descended, the hush that fell was not unkind. Heads turned, fans fluttered, and Evelyn's cheeks glowed with nervous courage. Adrian waited at the foot of the stairs, tall and severe in black and silver, his mask gleaming. He offered his arm without a word, and Evelyn placed her hand in his, the room spinning as their eyes met. In that instant, the doubts and dangers receded. For one night, she would live as if dreams could be true. The orchestra launched into a waltz. Adrian led her onto the floor, his touch steady. The crowd parted, curiosity and gossip swirling behind their wake. As they danced, the world faded to a blur of candlelight and laughter. "You are radiant," Adrian murmured, his voice low and uncertain. "I scarcely recognize myself beside you." Evelyn smiled, daring at last to tease him. "Then let us both be strangers tonight, free of the past, if only for an hour." He almost laughed, the sound rough and genuine. If only. Around them, whispers grew. Some marveled, some sneered, but Evelyn felt none of it. For 3 dances, they moved as one, the music carrying them beyond fear. But shadows crept at the edge of the celebration. Lord Henry prowled the room, glass in hand, his smile brittle. The Dowager Countess observed everything from her throne near the dais, lips pursed in disapproval. Servants darted between guests, and the masks meant to charm hid judgments as sharp as knives. The 4th dance ended. Adrian led Evelyn from the floor, but Henry blocked their path, his face flushed with drink and fury. "Leaving so soon, Sinclair?" Henry's words slurred, loud enough to draw a circle of attention. "Surely you won't deprive us of your company, or your fascinating mask." Adrian stiffened, jaw clenched. "This is neither the time nor the place, Lord Henry." Henry smirked, his voice rising. "Is it not? I think it's past time everyone sees the man behind the legend, the monster behind the mask." He lunged, tearing the mask from Adrian's face. The silk tie snapped, and the mask tumbled to the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The scar, angry and pale, running from temple to jaw, was laid bare in the harsh light. A hush fell, brittle and absolute. For a moment, Adrian stood frozen, stripped of his last protection. Shame and old agony warred in his eyes. Then, without a word, he turned and fled, the crowd recoiling as if his pain were contagious. Evelyn's breath caught. She broke from Henry's grasp, skirts flying, and followed Adrian through the marble corridors, her slippers silent on the flagstones. She found him in the portrait gallery, beneath the gaze of ancestors who had never known such ruin. He stood with his back to her, shoulders shaking. His hands gripped the mantle as if he might tear it from the wall. "Adrian," she whispered. He did not turn. "You should not be here." Evelyn crossed the room, ignoring the portraits, the cold, the world. She touched his arm. "I will not leave you alone." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Did you see their faces, their horror? I was a fool to think I could step into the light. This is what I am, Evelyn. This is all I can offer." She moved in front of him, searching his face. "You are not what they see. You are not your scars." He met her gaze at last, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You would comfort me out of pity." "Never out of pity," she said fiercely. "You are brave, Adrian. You have carried burdens no one else could bear. Let me help you. Let me share the weight." His defenses crumbled. He slumped onto a velvet bench, head in his hands. Evelyn sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders. They sat in silence, the weight of the evening pressing in. Then, haltingly, Adrian spoke. "I'm afraid for you, for your reputation, your family. I have nothing but ruin to give. I have wanted you. I want you still, but I cannot destroy you, Evelyn. I will not." She pressed his hand between hers. "What if I am willing to risk it? What if I care for you not in spite of your scars, but because you let me see them?" He shook his head, anguish raw in every line. "Love is not enough. Your mother would despise me, the world would laugh. And you would come to regret this. I cannot ask it of you." Tears burned in Evelyn's eyes. "You do not have to ask. I am no longer a child. I know my own heart." He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, hope and despair warring in his gaze. "Do you, truly?" She nodded, but her voice faltered. "I want to be brave. I want to choose you. But I am afraid of losing everything, of hurting those I love. I do not know what to do." They sat together, surrounded by the faded glory of Blackwood's past, two souls battered by expectation, longing, and fear. At last, Evelyn stood. "I must go. My mother will come for me." Adrian did not try to stop her. He only watched as she slipped from the gallery, her absence a new ache. In her chamber, Lady Helena awaited, pale with fury. "We are leaving at first light. I will not see you thrown to the wolves for a man who cannot save himself. You will not disgrace this family." Evelyn's resolve crystallized. "No, Mamma, I will not go. I will not abandon him. I will not abandon myself." Lady Helena's gasp was sharp, but Evelyn stood her ground, heart pounding with fear and defiance. Downstairs, the ballroom echoed with whispers and the first stirrings of scandal. Above, Evelyn pressed her hands to her lips, torn between hope and heartbreak, knowing everything must change before the dawn. Yet, as the moonlight spilled over Blackwood Hall, neither Evelyn nor Adrian could foresee what secrets and sacrifices the coming hours would demand. Scandal swept across the county on the wind's heels, seeping into drawing rooms and church pews with the relentless certainty of storm clouds. It began as whispers at the masked ball of Evelyn and the earl, unmasked and unguarded, then swelled into open condemnation. Letters arrived at Blackwood Hall, stiff with disapproval and thinly veiled threats. Invitations dried up. The Ashcroft name, already fragile, became a byword for recklessness and ruin. Within the hall, the Dowager Countess wasted no time. Her anger was cold, her resolve absolute. She summoned Adrian to the library, her cane tapping against the tiles in a percussive warning. "You have brought disgrace upon this house," she declared, her voice sharp as cut glass. "There are only two paths left to you, Adrian. Restore our fortunes or forfeit what little remains. I have arranged a meeting with Miss Pembroke. Her father's purse is deep, her reputation unblemished. You will do your duty, or you will be left with nothing, not the hall, not the land, not the title." Adrian stood silent, his face a mask. Only his hands betrayed him, clenched white at his sides. "Will you threaten to cast me out, mother?" he said softly. "It will not be the first time you have chosen pride over kindness." The dowager's eyes flashed. "Do not mistake kindness for weakness. I have sacrificed for this family. You will do the same." He bowed his head, the weight of legacy crushing any protest. In the days that followed, Blackwood Hall became a prison of cold civility. Evelyn, once greeted with cautious warmth by servants and villagers alike, found herself shunned. The maids' glances grew wary, the footmen's bows stiff. In the village, doors closed more quickly. Old friends crossed the street to avoid her. Lady Helena's anger burned with a mother's desperation. "You have ruined yourself, Evelyn," she spat one night, voice trembling. "You have ruined us all. No decent house will have you now. Henry was your last chance." Evelyn listened, numb, her own voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I will not marry a man who hates me. I will not trade my soul for safety." Her only solace lay in moments stolen from the relentless scrutiny. In the shadowed corners of the garden, in the echoing quiet of the old chapel, Adrian waited. Their meetings were brief, fraught with longing and fear. The world pressed hard against them, but in each other's presence hope flickered. One afternoon, rain drumming against the glass, Adrian found Evelyn in the conservatory, her hands trembling over a pot of dying violets. He knelt beside her, his voice rough. "I cannot bear to see you suffer for me." She met his gaze, her own eyes fierce. "I would suffer 1,000 times to have known you. You have given me more truth in these weeks than I had in a lifetime of comfort." He reached for her hand, his own scarred fingers gentle. "I do not know how to save us. My mother is relentless, the estate is failing, and Henry—" She cut him off, her grip tightening. "Let Henry plot. Let them all judge. We know what is real." His mask slipped. "Do we? I have spent my life running from myself, Evelyn. I let my anger destroy everything I loved. I must pay for that." She shook her head, tears threatening. "You punish yourself for what cannot be undone." He closed his eyes, shuddering. "I must tell you the truth, before it is too late." He drew a breath and began, his voice raw. "The duel was not honor, nor justice. It was pride mine. My fiancée. She loved another, though she denied it. I confronted him. I forced the challenge. I was reckless. When she learned what I had done, she fled into the storm, into the night. The carriage overturned. She died alone, and I survived. But I lost everything." Evelyn's tears fell then, silent and unashamed. She touched his scar, reverent. "You have carried this alone for so long." He nodded, voice breaking. "I am unworthy of you. I am unworthy of forgiveness." She cupped his face, her own sorrow mingling with his. "We are both afraid, Adrian. I fear a life without love, a life traded for duty and nothingness. I fear never being seen, never being chosen for myself. But I love you, Adrian. I love you in spite of everything." He crushed her to him, desperate, and for one trembling moment the world disappeared. But reality returned with the sound of voices in the corridor, of the dowager's cane and Lady Helena's weeping. They parted, breathless and broken. In the following days, the dowager tightened her grip. She paraded Miss Pembroke through the hall, her laughter brittle, her glances sharp. Adrian submitted to introductions, his voice polite but empty. The estate's creditors pressed harder. The accounts bled red ink. The staff whispered about dismissal, about the end of Blackwood's reign. Henry, meanwhile, stalked the periphery, his threats growing darker. Evelyn intercepted a letter meant for the dowager, a promise to expose Adrian's madness and hasten his ruin if Evelyn did not relent. Despair closed in. Evelyn's world shrank to a few hostile rooms, a handful of hurried, hungry embraces. She saw no future. Adrian's eyes grew hollow, and his laughter vanished. One evening, as dusk painted the windows gold, Adrian found her in the library. He looked thinner, his clothes hanging loose. He took her hands in his expression grave. "I must marry Miss Pembroke," he said. "If I do not, my mother will sell the estate. The villagers will lose their homes. I will lose everything. I cannot ask you to stay and watch me become someone else's husband. I cannot ask you to share this ruin." Evelyn's heart shattered, but she held his gaze. "And what of love, Adrian? What of us?" He pressed his lips to her forehead, his voice barely a whisper. sometimes love is not enough. That night, unable to sleep, Evelyn wandered the empty corridors, the weight of hopelessness suffocating. She remembered the village, the kindness she had found there, the vicar's gentle words, the children's laughter. In desperation, she pulled her cloak around her shoulders and slipped out into the night. The vicar's house was warm, lamplight spilling into the lane. He answered her knock with surprise, ushering her into his study. "My dear Miss Ashcroft," he said kindly, "what brings you to my door at this hour?" Her voice trembled with urgency. "I do not know what else to do. The hall is failing. Adrian is being forced into a loveless match. The dowager will see him ruined before she allows him happiness. My family is lost. I am lost." The vicar listened, his eyes wise and sorrowful. "Love is a gift, Miss Ashcroft, but it is also a duty to oneself and to those we care for. Blackwood has stood for centuries not because of its stones, but because of the hearts within it. You and Lord Blackwood are not alone, not if you choose not to be." She wept then, her grief and hope mingling. "Is there a way forward? Any at all?" The vicar pressed her hands. "There is always a way, but it may not be the one you expect. Sometimes, salvation comes from the most unlikely source." As dawn crept over the hills, Evelyn returned to the hall, determination rekindled in her chest. She would not surrender to despair. She would fight for Adrian, for herself, for the fragile hope that love, once kindled, could yet survive the darkness. But as she crossed the threshold, she sensed the gathering storm. Choices would have to be made, and the price of love might prove steeper than any of them could bear. The future of Blackwood and of two wounded hearts hung in the balance, waiting for a courage neither had ever dared before. The dawn, after Evelyn's desperate visit to the vicar, broke cold and grey over Blackwood Hall. It was a morning caught between hope and despair, the kind of morning when every sound seemed to echo with meaning. In the small stone church, the vicar knelt in silent prayer, his thoughts heavy with the secrets entrusted to him. He had watched Adrian Sinclair grow from a boy into a haunted man, and now he saw the struggle etched more deeply than ever in those grey eyes. When Adrian appeared at the church door, shoulders bowed, the vicar rose to meet him, kindness softening his lined features. "You have come for counsel, my lord." Adrian nodded, voice raw. "I have lost everything, and it is my own doing. I cannot forgive myself, and I cannot ask forgiveness of others." The vicar guided him to the pew, sitting close. "Forgiveness is not given because we deserve it, but because it is needed. You have hidden behind shame, Adrian, but shame is a poor shelter." He laid a hand on Adrian's. "You have shown mercy to others, now show it to yourself. Hope is not the enemy, it is the beginning." Adrian stared at the altar, torn. "Even if I find hope, what of Evelyn? Her life is destroyed by loving me. She is stronger than you think. And you are not alone, not in your suffering, nor your redemption." While Adrian struggled with his heart, Evelyn's world shrank to the four walls of her chamber. Lady Helena, discovering her midnight flight and learning of the vicar's involvement, erupted in fury. "You will not shame me further," she declared, her voice shaking. "You will marry Henry, or you will remain here until you see sense." The door was locked, the key vanished. Meals arrived on a tray, and her only company was her pounding heart. Despair threatened, but Evelyn's resolve hardened. She would not yield to fear. At night, she pressed her ear to the door, listening for the soft tread of footsteps, the faintest sign of help. It came in the form of Mary, the housemaid, who risked everything to slip her a note. "The villagers are gathering. Do not give up hope. Help is near." Outside Blackwood Hall, news of Evelyn's plight and Adrian's disgrace had reached the village. Old Mrs. Finney, the vicar, the carpenter whose roof Adrian had mended, and even the orphaned children remembered the earl's quiet acts of charity. They rallied, voices rising in defense of the man society scorned. They brought baskets of bread, jars of preserves, and stood in the rain before the hall's gates, demanding justice for those who had always shown them kindness. The Dowager Countess watched from an upstairs window, her composure eroding as she saw the faces of those she had dismissed, grateful, loyal, unyielding. For the first time, doubt flickered in her proud eyes. Had she been wrong? Had her harshness only deepened her son's wounds? Inside, the tension mounted. Henry, embittered by Evelyn's refusal and eager to seize his last chance at revenge, hatched a plan as cruel as it was cowardly. He forged letters, imitating Adrian's hand, and planted them among the earl's things. He whispered to the dowager and select guests that Adrian's mind was slipping, that he spoke to ghosts, that his isolation was a sign of madness. He bribed a footman to find the letters, then promised a dramatic revelation in the hall's great drawing room. As the hour of Henry's reckoning drew near, Mary slipped into Evelyn's chamber, urgency in every movement. "Miss, now is your chance. The key quickly!" Evelyn's heart leapt. She embraced Mary, promising gratitude she could never repay, then hurried down the servants' stairs, her skirts clutched in trembling hands. She burst into the gardens, lungs burning with relief and fear, and dashed toward the hall, her path muddy but clear. Inside, the great drawing room was packed. The dowager sat in her carved chair, flanked by Lady Helena, who looked pale and defeated. The villagers pressed at the doors, their murmurs filling the air. Henry stood at the center, a sheaf of papers in his hand, his smile triumphant. "Let us have silence," he called, "for the truth must be known. Lord Blackwood has deceived you all. These letters written in his own hand prove his instability. He is unfit to hold title, unfit to manage this estate, and certainly unfit to court the affections of any respectable woman." Gasps and whispers swept the room. The dowager's lips tightened. Lady Helena wept silently. Adrian, standing alone by the fireplace, met Henry's gaze with icy disdain. "Are you finished, Pembroke?" Adrian asked quietly. Henry sneered. "Finished? I have only begun. Shall I read aloud the ravings of a madman?" At that moment, Evelyn burst into the room, hair unbound, cheeks flushed with desperation. The crowd parted, shock giving way to curiosity as she strode to Adrian's side. "Do not listen to him," Evelyn cried. "It is all lies born of jealousy and spite. I have seen the man you are, Adrian. I have seen your courage and your kindness. You have nothing to be ashamed of, nothing." Henry rounded on her, voice venomous. "You would defend him even now? You would risk your name for a ruined man?" She met his fury with steady resolve. "I would risk everything for truth and for love." The villagers erupted in support. Mrs. Finney pushed her way forward, shaking her cane. "The Earl saved my Thomas from starvation. He paid the doctor when my daughter was ill. He is no madman. He is the best man in this county." The vicar raised his voice. "I have known Lord Blackwood all his life. His sorrow is deep, but his mind is sound. If madness is kindness, we need more of it in this world." The dowager hesitated, her grip loosening on the armrest. She looked at her son, really looked, as if seeing him for the first time since childhood. Henry, desperate, brandished the forged letters. "You are all blind. You cannot see what he hides, what he truly is." Adrian stepped forward, his voice clear and unwavering. "What I am, Lord Pembroke, is a man who has made mistakes. I have suffered, I have grieved, but I have never been mad. I have hidden my face out of shame, not madness. And I will hide no longer." He turned to the assembled crowd, shoulders straightening as if casting off a great weight. "Let them see me. Let them judge me for what I am, not for what I was, nor for what cowards would whisper behind closed doors." Evelyn stood beside him, her hand finding his. In the hush that followed, hope shimmered in the air, a hope that perhaps, at last, truth would triumph over rumor and love over fear. But even as the crowd murmured its support, shadows lingered at the edge of the gathering. Henry's eyes promised vengeance not yet spent, and the dowager's doubts warred with pride. The future of Blackwood, and of all those who called it home, teetered on the precipice waiting for the next choice, the next act of courage, to decide whether love could truly conquer the past. A tempest of voices churned in the great hall of Blackwood, the air so thick with accusation and dread that even the ancient portraits seemed to recoil. Adrian stood at the center of it all, unmasked, every scar and shadow exposed beneath the grand chandelier's merciless light. By his side stood Evelyn, her chin high despite the whispers that swirled around them like a gathering storm. At the front, Henry's voice cut through the tumult, shrill with desperation and triumph. He brandished the forged letters as if they were holy writ. "Here proof of Lord Blackwood's instability. In his own hand ramblings, threats, confessions no sane man would utter. He flung the papers onto a table, their inked lies fanning out for all to see. The Dowager Countess, regal in her mourning black, rose with the authority of a judge pronouncing sentence. You have shamed this house, Adrian. My heart breaks to see what you have become. I will not defend you further. Lady Helena, pale and trembling, clung to her chair. When Henry's accusations echoed from stone to stone, her eyes rolled back and she slumped, fainting dead away. Servants rushed to her side, the crowd gasping and drawing back. Adrian's world narrowed to Evelyn's hand clutching his, her touch the only anchor as all else seemed to tilt and slip away. Enough! Evelyn's voice rang clear, slicing through the scandal and outrage. Enough of this cruelty, these lies. I stand with Adrian. I love him. I love him for his courage, for his kindness, for the strength it takes to endure your scorn. Lord Pembroke, you have lied to us all. These letters are forgeries, born of your own bitterness. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Henry's face flushed a livid red. You are blinded by infatuation, Miss Ashcroft. You would risk your reputation, your very name, for a ruined man. Evelyn's voice never wavered. I would risk far more for the truth, and I would never bind myself to a man whose only weapons are deceit and malice. Henry lunged forward, but the vicar stooped and gentle-eyed stepped between them, raising his cane. That is enough, sir. I have known Lord Blackwood since he was a boy. I have seen his suffering, yes, but also his generosity. He paid for the repairs of half this village, rescued children from want, and never once sought recognition. If madness is what you seek, look not to Adrian, but to those whose hearts are ruled by envy. The villagers surged forward, voices raised in support. Old Mrs. Finney, clutching her tattered shawl, cried out, He saved my Thomas from starvation. He is no madman, he is a blessing. Others echoed her, the tide of voices rising, drowning Henry's protestations. The dowager, shaken, faltered. She gazed at the faces arrayed before her. Not the peers of her youth, but the people whose daily lives Adrian had quietly bettered. Her voice, when it came, was softer, uncertain. Perhaps I have been mistaken. Perhaps I have demanded too much and given too little in return. Henry, seeing the tide turn, attempted one last gambit. You are all fools. You would see this house destroyed for a love affair and a scarred fool's pride. But the crowd had turned. No one listened. The forged letters were gathered and examined by the vicar and several gentlemen. The handwriting compared, the inconsistencies revealed. Disgraced, Henry threw the sheaf of lies at the dowager's feet and fled the hall, his boots echoing through the marble corridors as the doors slammed behind him. In the silence that followed, Lady Helena revived, eyes blinking wide with fear and confusion. She clutched Evelyn's hand, voice trembling. My child, what have you done? The world will not forgive this. We may lose everything. Evelyn knelt beside her mother, her voice gentle but resolute. I have found something worth more than reputation, more than safety. I have found truth, and I have found love. I cannot walk away from that, not even for you. Lady Helena's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded, defeated and proud all at once. You are braver than I ever was. I only pray that it is enough. Adrian, now fully revealed to friend and foe alike, found himself at the center of a hush so profound it seemed the house itself held its breath. He looked to Evelyn, her presence blazing with defiance and devotion, and drew strength from her gaze. He turned to the assembly, voice unsteady but clear. I have hidden for too long from you, from myself. I have let shame rule me. But tonight, I will speak plainly. I love Evelyn Ashcroft. She has given me hope, when all I knew was despair. I cannot offer her fortune or an unblemished name, but I offer her all that I am. If there is redemption for a man such as I, it is in her love. Murmurs swept the room, astonishment, approval, a few shocked protests. Evelyn rose, crossed to Adrian's side, and, with deliberate tenderness, drew his face down to hers. She kissed him openly, without fear, before the entire assembly. The gesture was scandalous, but it was also redemptive. A declaration that no mask, no scar, no lie could separate them now. The villagers cheered. The vicar smiled through tears. The dowager, tears glimmering in her proud eyes, looked away, but did not object. In that moment, beneath the ancient roof of Blackwood Hall, two souls were united, unmasked and unashamed. Yet as the cheers faded, a hush settled. For all their triumph, the estate's fate still hung by a thread. Blackwood's future was uncertain, the shadow of debt and ruin undispelled. But in the heart of that uncertainty, love had claimed its victory, a fragile, defiant light burning in the darkness, daring the future to do its worst. Beyond the windows, night pressed close, and the story of Blackwood Hall was not yet finished. The dawn would bring new trials, new choices, and the final test of whether love and courage could truly save them all. In the weeks that followed the storm in Blackwood Hall's great chamber, the world outside seemed to exhale. The tide of scandal receded as swiftly as it had risen, replaced by curiosity, then cautious approval. The truth of Henry's deception and the villagers' loyalty spread from cottage to carriage, even reaching the far drawing rooms of London, where Lady Helena's friends first gasped, then grudgingly admired the Ashcroft daughter's courage. Still, the future was not a fairy tale. Now that love had been declared and reputations tentatively restored, Evelyn and Adrian faced the raw, unvarnished work of forging a life together. The estate's salvation came not with a single gesture, but through a series of reconciliations and sacrifices. Evelyn's dowry, modest by London standards, but substantial in the countryside, was quietly transferred to Blackwood's nearly empty coffers. The Dowager Countess, shaken by her son's steadfastness and Eveline's unwavering loyalty, summoned her solicitor and arranged for the last of her jewels and a parcel of ancestral land to be sold. Her words, when she summoned Adrian and Evelyn to her side, were brisk but sincere. "I have been proud, and I have been cruel," she admitted, voice unsteady. "Yet I see now that pride cannot warm a hearth, nor can bitterness mend a broken house. Blackwood's future lies in your hands. Spend what you are given with wisdom and with love." Lady Helena, whose heart had been battered by hope and fear, found herself unexpectedly moved. She watched as Adrian knelt to thank her for her blessing, and saw, not a ruined man, but a son-in-law, whose devotion made her daughter shine. One afternoon, as autumn sunlight slanted through the oriel windows, she took Evelyn's hands and pressed them with trembling fingers. "Child, I doubted your path, but I see now that you are stronger than I ever dreamed. May you never lose that courage, nor the love that made you fight for it." So it was that Adrian and Evelyn began their married life not in the hush of luxury, but in the clamor and labor of renewal. The first days were spent in the old estate office, poring over ledgers, their heads bent together in shared purpose. The roof was mended, the orchard replanted, the village school supplied with new books. Blackwood Hall's doors, once closed to all but the highest born, swung wide for the villagers who had stood by them in the darkest hour. A harvest festival was held in the great hall, the tables laden with bread and cider. Laughter echoed from the long gallery. Children chased each other through the gardens, and Adrian, no longer masked, walked among them all, his scars visible in the golden light. The villagers greeted him not with pity, but with warmth and gratitude. His wounds became a badge of resilience, a testament to what could be overcome and forgiven. Society, ever skeptical, watched from a distance. There were those who sniffed at the unconventional marriage of the scarred earl and the headstrong Ashcroft girl, who whispered behind fans at the opera and sent letters filled with veiled warnings. Yet the couple gave them little ammunition. They were often seen side by side in the village, Evelyn with a basket of cakes for the sick, Adrian consulting with the tenants, sleeves rolled to the elbow. When criticism came, they met it with a smile or with silence. Their marriage was a union of opposites and equals. There were quarrels, sometimes sharp, for both were proud and neither accustomed to compromise, but the quarrels were followed by reconciliation, by long walks under the chestnut trees, or hours spent in the library. Evelyn's head on Adrian's shoulder as he read poetry aloud. They learned the language of each other's silences, the balm in a touch or a glance. At night, in the privacy of their chamber, their passion was unrestrained. The old fears burned away by the certainty of belonging. Evelyn, now the Countess of Blackwood, discovered a strength within herself that surprised even those who knew her best. She organized charity drives, founded a school for the village girls, and learned the names and histories of every tenant on the estate. She listened to their troubles, celebrated their joys, and became not only their lady, but their champion. When a fever swept the village, she nursed the sick herself, Adrian at her side. In the dark hours, she sometimes doubted but never faltered. For Adrian, the change was profound. He no longer hid his face, nor shied from the gaze of strangers. The old shame faded, replaced by a quiet pride in what he and Evelyn were building. He returned to his art, painting scenes of the estate and its people, gifting portraits to those who had shown him kindness. He wrote to old friends, inviting them to visit, and some came hesitant at first, then charmed by the warmth that now suffused Blackwood Hall. It was not an easy life, but it was honest. Their joys were all the sweeter for having been hard-won. There were moments when Evelyn would catch Adrian watching her from across a crowded room, his eyes filled with wonder and gratitude, as if he still could not believe his good fortune. One evening, as they walked together beneath the ancient oaks, Adrian stopped and took her hands in his. "Evelyn, I do not know what I have done to deserve you. You have restored more than this house. You have restored me to myself." She smiled, pressing her forehead to his. "We restored each other, my love, and whatever the world may say, this is enough." As the seasons turned, Blackwood Hall flourished once more. The land grew fruitful, laughter returned to its halls, and a new chapter began for all those who called it home. Yet whispers from the outside world persisted, and the shadows of the past lingered at the edges. But Adrian and Evelyn faced them together, hand in hand, their love a beacon against all doubt. Their story was not yet finished. Trials and triumphs awaited, and the true measure of their courage and their love would be tested in ways neither could yet foresee. Years passed, and Blackwood Hall stood transformed, a place reborn from the ashes of old scandal, now radiant with the warmth of art, laughter, and open hearts. The land, once threatened by weeds and neglect, ripened under careful stewardship. The ancient house, with its mended stones and sun-warmed windows, became a living testament to what courage and forgiveness could accomplish. In these golden years, Adrian and Evelyn's bond endured every trial that time and fortune devised. There were seasons of hardship, a harsh winter that threatened the fields, a fever that swept the village, but each adversity only deepened their unity. Disagreements came, as they must in any passionate union, but they always found their way back to each other, their devotion strengthened by honest words and gentle hands. Love was no longer a fragile hope, but a sturdy foundation. The Dowager Countess, once the stern architect of her family's pride, had softened beneath the gentle onslaught of grandchildren and peace. She was often found in the nursery, reading aloud from battered storybooks, her lap crowded with little ones who knew her only as grandmama. It was said she smiled more in those years than in all her life before. She boasted of Adrian's accomplishments and doted upon Evelyn with a fondness that bordered on pride. Lady Helena visited often, her pride in her daughter undiminished by the world's judgment. She presided over tea on the terrace and offered advice with a wry smile. Gone was the woman who clung to reputation with desperate hands. In her place was a mother who delighted in the woman her daughter had become. Sometimes, she would watch Evelyn surrounded by children and villagers, her heart swelling with a bittersweet pride. Henry's name faded to a whisper, a warning spoken in drawing rooms to reckless young men. Broken by his own ambition, he drifted from society, a ghost of old grievances. Once, a letter arrived at Blackwood unsigned, full of regret. Evelyn tucked it away in a drawer, a silent testament to the cost of envy and pride. Blackwood Hall itself became a beacon in the county. Its doors remained open to all. Artists, poets, laborers, and orphans found welcome there. The great hall, once the stage for confrontation and disgrace, now echoed with music and laughter. Every summer, a festival filled the gardens with song. Canvases and sculptures lined the corridors, many the work of Adrian and Evelyn themselves, or of the students they encouraged. Evelyn flourished in her new world, her spirit unbound. She painted in the restored gardens, the air sweet with lavender and roses, her easel set beneath the shade of the old yew tree. Her children played nearby, dark-haired and bright-eyed, their laughter ringing over the lawns. The village girls she had once taught now brought their own little ones to learn their letters, or paint beside her. Evelyn's art became known beyond Blackwood. Her landscapes and portraits graced parish halls and London galleries alike. On one golden afternoon, as the sun slanted low and the air shimmered with the promise of summer, Evelyn paused at her canvas, lost in thought. She traced the lines of her painting, a memory of another night, long ago, when a storm raged and she had kissed the man behind the mask. She smiled, recalling the desperate courage that moment had required. The world had seemed so cruel, the future so uncertain. Yet here she was, loved and loving, her heart full. The ghosts of fear and shame had faded, replaced by the steady light of trust and joy. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. She turned to find Adrian, unmasked, his face bronzed by years of sun and labor, his eyes warm with affection. The old scars had softened, their edges blurred by time and the touch of children's hands. To Evelyn, they were beautiful marks of survival and redemption, not shame. Adrian drew close, his gaze lingering on her painting, then on her. "You still capture this place better than I ever could," he teased, stooping to brush a kiss against her cheek. She laughed, leaning into him. "You're too modest. I saw the portrait you finished of Mary's twins. She cried when she saw it." He shrugged, his hand finding hers. "Perhaps I have learned a little about hope, and about seeing what matters beneath the surface." They stood together, watching their children race through the long grass, the gardens a riot of color and life. "Do you ever think," Adrian asked quietly, "what might have been if you had chosen differently?" Evelyn shook her head. "I chose you. I would choose you again, in every life. Even in our darkest moments, I saw the man behind the scars. And look what we have built." He squeezed her hand, voice rough with emotion. "You saved me, Evelyn, not just from the past, but from myself." She smiled up at him, her eyes shining. "No, my love, we saved each other." As the sun dipped and laughter swelled from the distant lawns, the estate itself seemed to hum with contentment. Blackwood Hall, once a fortress of secrets and shame, now welcomed all comers, its walls alive with music, its gardens filled with joy. Adrian's scars were no longer whispered about, but honored as proof of what a soul could endure and overcome. Their marriage, unconventional and passionate, inspired others to seek love on their own terms. And Evelyn, once the spirited girl constrained by duty, now stood tall as the Countess of Blackwood, an artist, a mother, a wife, and above all, a woman unafraid to see and to be seen. Together, she and Adrian had made their home not just a sanctuary, but a promise fulfilled, a place where love triumphed over fear, and the soul beneath the scars was cherished above all. Their story was whispered by firesides and sung at weddings, a legend of courage, forgiveness, and hope. And as the twilight settled over Blackwood, Evelyn's heart brimmed with gratitude for the storm that had brought her here, for the man who had dared to hope, and for the life they had built, hand in hand, beneath the ever-changing sky.